Good afternoon, Suidlanders. How are you? We trust that you are very, very well. This afternoon, I'd like to chat to you briefly about a development today at the Reserve Bank. It's not a very long story, but it's probably quite important that Suidlanders should know about it, because it seems more and more as if as we go into difficult times in the world, we've had 3 years of quite challenging times, I'm sure that everybody would agree. It seems that rather than less and less, in other words, rather than that many people are waking up to what's going on, it appears as if just a few are, but Suidlanders appear to be waking up more and more. It seems as if Suidlanders members are discovering and understanding the truths of what's going on in the world around us in leaps and bounds, whereas most normie, average, mainstream people are only discovering very incrementally the truths of the world around them. Of course, they're discovering in a practical sense. So, for instance, I think that most lefty, liberal, mainstream white South Africans know that groceries are costing more, but they don't seem to have any comprehension of it. They are observing the sudden adult death syndrome around them to some extent, to a greater or lesser degree, but very few have any comprehension of what's causing it. So it's good when Suidlanders understand the financial challenges that are emerging in the world around us. I'll explain. On News 24 today, we have the report from, well, I suppose it's on every website, from the Reserve Bank meeting of today. It's called the MPC, Monetary Policy Committee meeting, and it's held usually every quarter, not only, but usually. And at that meeting, they set the monetary policy for South Africa for the forthcoming period. So they'll say, well, we see that inflation is up a little bit, and it seems as if employment is up or down or left or right. So we think that we should control the money in South Africa in the following way. And it's usually by the rate at which they, the Reserve Bank, lend money to the commercial banks. So that's called the repo rate. It's short for repurchase rate. And that has, in the past, over the past 3 sessions, that is to say today, 3 months ago and 3 months before that, gone up by 75 basis points on each occasion. What is a basis point? A basis point is 1/100th of 1%. So if you multiply 100 by 100, you get 10,000. So it's 10,000ths. Why do they deal in such tiny numbers? Because it has a tremendous effect. The smallest movement in the repo rate has a big effect when it's like a stick or a lever. If you use a short stick as a lever, its power is far less than if you use a long stick. It's called Archimedean lever effect. Similarly, when a tiny change has an influence over a huge environment, like all of South Africa's money, the effect is actually very, very big. So they don't deal in percents, they deal in hundredths of percent when they talk about basis points. And as I said, today the Monetary Policy Committee of the Reserve Bank took a decision to raise the repo rate, that is to say the rate at which they lend money to the commercial banks, to I beg your pardon, 75 basis points, taking it to 7%. Now, if you take 75 hundredths from 7%, you get 625 or 6.25%. So it was 6.25% previously, and as I said to you, it's now gone up 3 times in a row by 75 basis points. Before that, it was 5.5%, and before that, it was 4.75%. So it went from 4.75 to 5.5 to 6.25, and on this now third occasion in a row that they've raised it by 75 basis points, it has gone up to 7%. And that has some obvious knock-on effects, well understood effects. And therefore, the experts are able to discipline. It's for blood sugar. You know, if you've got bad blood sugar, your blood gets treacly, syrupy, not good for pumping in the body. Discipline thins it. And I've had I don't know, my medication didn't do what it was supposed to today, or that's how it felt. Anyway, one of the effects that the experts can predict pretty reliably is that the prime rate of the commercial banks will now move to 10.5%. So they are borrowing money from the Reserve Bank at 7% and lending it to their best customers at 10.5%. And so it is when you go to get a mortgage or a car loan, you might be offered prime plus 2 or prime plus 3 or whatever. Meaning that you are seen as a customer who's not quite the very, very best customer or client. They're going to charge you another 2% or 1%, and that's to cover risk. The excellence of your custom is adjudicated upon the basis of how reliably and dependably you pay, or repay, I should say. So, those customers who've got a fantastic track record of repaying very large loans, 100% spot on, over 20, 30 years of doing business with the bank, they may be offered prime. And people who are perceived to be a little bit less reliable, going by your past history, going by your present circumstances, going by a few things, they would pay more, and that more is meant to cover the risk. So if they've got 100 customers or clients, and they know that 5 of them are probably going to mess them around, give them a bit of a hard time, mess with the money that they're trying to make in interest, you know, how reliably and dependably they make it, whether it happens every month or goodness me, they have to wait 3 months for this guy. That 2% is meant to be the cover the risk. So we're going to cream a little bit more out of you because we know there's a slight chance you're going to muck us about. And if we cream a little bit more out of our 90 not prime customers, at the end of the day, we'll have the 5 least reliable customers' defaults, failures to pay back, covered. So there you have the repo rate and the prime rate. Now, why would they do this in the first place? What does raising the interest rate do for anything? Increasing the rate of interest deters inflation. In other words, perhaps it's better if we explain it from the other point of view. What you know as inflation is probably incorrect. The most pure definition of the word inflation is an increase in the money supply. Meaning that when more money is put into the system, when there's more money around, when, like in the USA over recent years, they've printed trillions of dollars and fed it into the system in an effort to keep the system alive through tremendous difficulties over recent years in the United States. prices go up. But the price going up is not inflation. It is the symptom of inflation. There's lots of money around. People feel that they can charge more for goods, and they know that they can. They see they get more customers coming every day to buy a roll of toilet paper. They think, it looks as if there's good business to be made here. If we put the roll of toilet paper up by 10 cents, I don't think we'll lose any customers. These people seem to have billions of spondulics. That's how it's meant to work. In practice, it doesn't always work that way, particularly in the United States and other places. But that's the theory. So when you see the prices go up in the shop, that's not inflation. That's the symptom of inflation. That's the boil that you get on your elbow that gives you grievous pain every time you forget about it and you put your elbow down on a table somewhere or on a desk. But actually the boil is caused by something else. And those of you who follow Dr. Eric Berg on YouTube will know what I'm talking about. He's brilliant. He's an absolute genius at explaining how it's always something else that causes grey hair or thinning hair or male pattern baldness or whatever. Sore ankles, swollen knees, chubby thighs, as opposed to a chubby tummy or chubby arms. He explains these things brilliantly. So, what you're seeing when bread goes up from 17 Rand 50 a loaf to 20 Rand a loaf is not inflation. It's the consumer price index. It is the index in percentage terms of how much everything is going up every month. Now, if the Reserve Bank sees that there's an inflation problem in the country, that prices are going up, and that the Rand is losing its purchasing power, it is meant to endeavor to rein that in by whatever means it can do. Obviously, Zimbabwe is the perfect example of the failure to do so. Now, that story is far longer and more complicated than you can imagine. And it's not all that simple. But in theory, it's that simple. In theory, the Zimbabwean central bank did not have control over the money supply. They were under pressure to print money. The money lost its value. There was a consumer price index explosion. Although the newspapers and what have you casually use the word inflation. So the bank is inflating the volume of money. That is leading to consumer price index increase, and they weren't able to rein it in. They weren't able to control it because they were caught between a rock and a hard place, between the devil and the deep blue sea. On this hand, they had to do this, and Robert Mugabe was shouting at them for such and such. On the other hand, they had the people starving, and the money was worth nothing. And in the end, they couldn't win. And so there was the shocking disaster that led to them having trillion-dollar banknotes. And now the shocking disaster has gone on to them effectively adopting the United States dollar as their de facto currency. And now we hear that Zimbabwe is initiating an endeavor. So it's just beginning this attempt, this project to become a gold-backed currency. Now, we won't even go there. That is guaranteed to result in an assassination. You can bet your bottom dollar on it. It is what, for those people in the know, very serious observers of these things, are entirely agreed upon, happened to Muammar Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein. They were undermining the dollar by trying to move to a gold standard. Okay, so the long and the short of it is, the Reserve Bank has again implemented a large increase, quite a large increase. 75 basis points is pretty big in the repo rate, which will result in the bank's prime rate going to 10.5%, and all of our home loans and everything else being adjusted upward accordingly. Because the banks say effectively to you and me, well, we've got to pay the Reserve Bank more than we used to have to pay them on all of the money that we owe them. So you have to pay us more so that we have more to pay them. It's your problem, not ours, and certainly not the Reserve Bank's. Why should they take any responsibility for their job and their role? And why should we take responsibility for the loan agreements into which we've entered? No, it should be you. So, there you go, Suidlanders. And I'm going to end with this very briefly. This is an expression of a larger problem in the world today. Interest rates going up all over the show, particularly in developing economies. And we foresee that over the next 12, 14, 15 months, that problem is only going to worsen. Some of you, like me, may have had 5 to 6 interest rate increases on your home bonds this year already. Are we going to see another 5 next year? Probably. Probably. So we are entering into a time of difficulty when it comes to money. Does this mean that inflation is going to be stopped? No, probably not, because the factors, we spoke earlier about the devil in the deep blue sea, between a rock and a hard place, the factors that inform inflation, the factors that cause the Reserve Bank to have printed more money, leading to the symptom of consumer price increase, that stuff is not going away. So they've stopped printing money, they're raising interest rates, but it's a balancing act. And given the state of the government fiscus, the shortfalls in the budget, the extra 200 billion rand of Eskom and other debt that was taken on by the government in the medium-term budget policy statement of a few weeks ago by the Minister of Finance in the Parliament. In light of, there's something else that's just clean eluded me. Oh, the 12.9 billion hole of debt that is the toll roads, the e-tolls. Given all of these things, the likelihood is that they're going to be lighting fires while trying to put them out at the same time. They've got to lay their hands on lots and lots of money, but the more that they do so, the more money they get from the Reserve Bank, the more the ultimate problem of consumer price increase as felt by you and me when we pay our bonds and our motor vehicle loans at the end of every month. So that's the story for today, guys. Thank you very much for listening. Keep your eyes open for what's going on in the world around us. We are living in an exciting time, as you know very well. The dramas that we're seeing with Eskom, they're not going to go away. In fact, every sign is that they're going to get far worse. We see problems with employment, very big problems with the purchasing power of our money. We are beginning to feel unease, dis-ease in our entire society. So now is the time, now is the right time for you and me to be more vigilant, more alert, more reactive, better able to react and respond than ever before in most of our lifetimes, unless you're so old that you lived through the Great Depression. Anyway, thanks again, good night, and God bless all of you. Bye-bye.